The sky was dark, the storm clouds rolled and fear was all around. The lightning flashed, it's like the thunder shook the very ground. The wind was bending great oak trees, rain was pouring down, but somewhere hidden in the dark a ray of light was found. Suddenly a rainbow, suddenly the world knows, suddenly the love of God shines through. After the winds blow, after the storms go, we'll look up on the sky that's clear and blue. When storm clouds gathering overhead is more than I can stand, and problems of this world we live in always are at hand. When living in this sinful world is more than I can bear, I just close my eyes and I see the Lord, for He is always there. Suddenly a rainbow, suddenly the world knows, suddenly the love of God shines through. After the winds blow, after the storms go, we'll look up on a sky that's clear and blue. We'll look up on a sky that's clear and blue.
Got your blue book, turn to page 65. We'll sing a couple out of this one. 65. gonna sing a couple, and then we got a little thing after they get done singing.
Will you dare to be different in a sin-loving world? Will you stand for the one who stood for you? Though they call you old-fashioned when you mention his name, it doesn't matter if to him you have been true. It doesn't matter what the world may say or do. It doesn't matter, just as long as your heart is true. You'll be rewarded for the way God thinks of you. It doesn't matter if to him you have been true. Would you go to the garden? Would you watch with him there? Would you flee when they led my Lord away? Would you be his disciple? Though your friends turn you down, you'll be rewarded when well done you hear him say. It doesn't matter what the world may say or do. It doesn't matter, just as long as your heart is true. You'll be rewarded for the way God thinks of you. It doesn't matter if to him you have been true. It doesn't matter if to him you have been true.
If you curse me, then I will bless you. If you hurt me, I will forgive. And if you hate me, then I will love you. I choose the Jesus way.
If you're helpless, I will defend you. And if you're burdened, I'll share the way. And if you're hopeless, then let me show you there's hope in the Jesus way. I follow Jesus, I follow Jesus. He wore my sin out, gladly wear his name. He is the treasure, he is the answer. Oh, I choose the Jesus way.
If you strike me, I will embrace you. And if you chain me, I'll sing his praise. And if you kill me, my home is heaven, for I choose the Jesus way.
I follow Jesus.
Jesus way.
I choose the Jesus way.
I choose the Jesus way.
I choose the Jesus way. I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus. He bore my sin. I'll gladly wear His name. He is the treasure. He is the answer. Oh, I choose the Jesus way. Oh, I choose the Jesus way.
Like I said a while ago, this being Mother's Day, we're going to remember all the mothers and what a wonderful job that y'all do. And there ain't no doubt about it. I might bust my knuckles, and I might sweat, and I might get hurt, and I might have a rough job sometimes, but there ain't no job on planet Earth that's any harder than being a mother. And I fully believe that. So these girls here is going to pass these roses out to all you mothers out there. Trinity. Y'all done a great job. Good job. Go 3 or 4 if you want to.
To Ray, and he can carry it home to his wife. If there are any mothers that are not here, in that case, let's address that too.
Amen.
Because they're just as much a mother.
Amen. Amen.
I will give it to her as soon as we get home.
You better.
We'll know about it if you don't.
All right, well,
Hey, is that it?
I believe that's it. Good job, Trinity and Valerie. Appreciate y'all. Anyway, if there's nothing else, we're going to turn it over to Brother Larry.
I don't get to pray for you. Good morning. Seems like on special event days, I've always kind of been at a moment of pause, knowing because it's always about God. And I got to thinking on those lines today, but one of the greatest things that God ever gave us was mothers. And so if we couldn't praise Him for anything else today, then we could praise Him for loving us enough to create motherhood. I'm going to be reading from Proverbs chapter 31, and because I think this proverb captures motherhood. I don't know that he's talking about any particular wife on this occasion or mother, but it seems like he's incorporating the whole institution of motherhood. And, you know, when the roses went by, I was thinking, well, I wish I could hand one to Lola Mann today. It really would be something. I say these things all the time about if you could spend an hour with anybody that's passed on a park bench, then who would it be? And sometimes that almost seems impossible, but I sure would like to spend an hour with my mother and talk over some things. And there was just something about her. She brought security to me that God used her for, and it didn't matter what was going on in our family, and sometimes there was a lot. But as long as she was there, she was kind of like, you know, Moses when he was holding his arms up for the battle, that as long as mother was there, we couldn't lose. And I feel that way today. So I'm not going to read all of Psalm 31. I've kind of been reading through it, and I think God's laid some things on my heart. And then I want to say a few things about mothers. But if you would, turn with us to the 31st chapter of Proverbs, and we're going to start reading at verse 10. The first verse that we're going to read today is a question. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. And so it leaves us with this thought that if we search the world over and we're looking for virtue, then motherhood is one of the first stops we have to make. Whenever you think of your own mother, if she was loving at all, you know, sometimes there might be cases where they don't have the normal affection that they should, and the Bible even speaks to that. But on most occasions, they do. And when they have that natural affection for their children, then it's unspoken almost. There's no words for it. And it's just their presence. You know, my mother put Jergens lotion on her face at night every time before she went to bed. And most of my night kisses would have that flavor on it when I'd kiss her goodnight on the cheek. But boy, would I like to do that again. I might not appreciate it like I did before. But I think about mothers like that. Each home has an aroma. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not, but you can kind of sense it when you go into a house, that the mother really establishes the aroma of the house. And it's going to talk about that here in just a minute when it says, the heart of her husband doeth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She shall do him good and no evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. So I can almost see a picture of motherhood in my mind about when we think about virtuous, when we think about as good as it gets, then it seems like God took that, sprayed some sunshine on it, and gave us the thing called motherhood. And so when my mind goes to Lola, I kind of know where your mind goes if you had a mother that was loving and godly. It's just as easy as 1, 2, 3. And I think sometimes the sad part is we think we're going to have them forever. And I had mine for 32 years. And but when she went, it was suddenly. There wasn't a long illness. There was nothing like that. She died in her sleep. And so I've always had this desire to, maybe got to hug her one more time or to tell her I love her one more time. Or that's what it comes down to. There would never been enough time to do all the one more times with my mother that I would have liked to have done. And it was a hole. It was horrible in that sense. But yet, once it came to me, and this happened really at her funeral, when I realized what she had just accomplished, where she had just arrived. And I still had tears, but there was a smile in spite of everything that come through that. And I guess it's the understanding that as much as you love them, and I knew how much she had went through, and they all do. Mothers go through stuff. That's what he was talking about earlier. There's not a tougher job in the world. It's love at its apex. The children, you love them so much that it's the best thing that ever happened to you. But if something happens or touches them, then you have the greatest hurts you've ever had because, you know, you can't go through it for them. You try to, but they can't. And so you think about all those things, and I thought about my mother not having to go through that anymore. I thought about she has finally reached a place where, you know, death has ended, or blindness or darkness had ended in sight, and she had got a glimpse of Jesus and eternity, and she would never be the same again. And that's why in this office today I played it twice, the song, I Have Just Seen Jesus. That is going to be the answer to any ill that any Christian has or has ever had. It'll be over in that instant because we're going to move into the power that is good only. We're going to move into the power that made motherhood, fatherhood, all those things that we cherish. And when we see Him, there's going to be a fullness of every desire that we've ever had. It's going to be met in Him. There'll be no more searching. There'll be no more yearning. There'll be no more sorrow. He'll wipe away the last tear. And then, believe it or not, sometimes it gets to where we can't, that we're going to be reunited with all those that's gone on before us. And can you imagine that for one eternal day? That's beyond me, but I'm longing for that. I'm looking not for the undertakers, I'm looking for the upper takers. I'm wanting them to come and take us away from here. Let's read on a little bit more, and I'm going to go down to verse 9 because it was talking about in verse 13, she seeketh wool and flax, works willing with her hands. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. Think about mothers. Man, I'm telling you what, that's almost like one of the qualifications. If they see somebody in need, they can't really usually go on. I don't care what it is. If the neighbor needs a cup of sugar, they got a cup of sugar. And, you know, whatever it is that can help fill that need. If a father gets crippled and he can't finish the crops, then that same spirit, you know, they'll come together as a community and maybe do his fields for him that year or work it until he is able to come back to it. And that's the best of humanity. We see that so much. The world's in sad shape, but what God has done is not. I remember when the tornado came through our area in 2010, I think it was 2010, over in Albertville, and it just kind of wiped the town out. It didn't look the same. You could walk down the streets, trees everywhere, and, you know, it didn't look the same, but something happened in the community, and people just couldn't do enough. I had men to come in and cut up all the trees, and I mean all our trees fell over that was of any size except one, and there was men come in, and they cut those things up, and they were doing it all over Albertville. And they weren't being asked. It wasn't, you know, I didn't know what we was going to do really. And then all of a sudden, you know, the sound of neighbors and the sound of love. And so everybody got caught up in that. And so people was going to the stores and buying water, getting it cold, and just riding around to where people were cutting wood or trying to get the town back. And they were handing them water or handing them a sandwich. And there was something that happened right then that it was Christmas personified. It was like goodwill towards the men just overflowed, and you were proud to be a part of that. It's what draws us together after a hurricane or after the fires that come through and tear up places. There's something good that comes out of that. That's the thing I love about Christmas every year is it seems like there's more peace on earth and goodwill towards your neighbor, and you kind of get caught up in that, and nothing represents that better than motherhood. Because she's going to look out there to the needy. And that's what it says here. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. She reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. For her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. You know, my mother most of the time, she didn't have much silk, you know. And she didn't have a lot of things because we lived in a little coal mine town and there just wasn't that many things going on. And so then the man would usually have a place and the women would have 5 or 6 kids, and you didn't think they had a full-time job. They didn't need to go out and find one. They had one. And it was a different time. And there was, I don't know, there was something about family that I guess sometimes I'm searching for it, but it's here still. Every time a newborn baby comes in this world, then it seems like it's awakened afresh. We've had a lot of those this last year or two that's been born, and it's kind of awakened something in us here at Eddy. It's, I don't know, it brings something that nothing else could. Motherhood, by the grace and power of God, brings us something that nothing else can. It says right here, she's not afraid of the snow. She's not worried about cold weather, and sometimes it can be very cold. I can remember at our house, we didn't have any kind of heating units or anything like that. There's a fireplace in the living room, and there was a coal stove in the kitchen, and that's it. And but there's something about, even in all that hardness, toughness, you know, trying to get out from under 7 quilts on a feather bed, that was kind of difficult. Some of you laughing because you know what I'm talking about. My mother used to lay me down in that feather bed, and then she'd say, Larry, get like you're going to lay. And at first, I didn't know what that meant. You ain't got to worry about no tossing and turning. You're either going to sleep on your back or you're going to sleep on your stomach. But once she puts them quilts on you, you're there to stay till she lets you out. And so it was wonderful. It was magical. And so, you know, not everything that we have invented has made progress come to the feeling of motherhood. Not all of it has brought us back to that, and we search for it in everything. And so it goes on to say, she maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. And I got to there earlier. My mama didn't have much of that, but she could make a cotton dress look like an evening gown when she wore it. My mother used to have a hope chest, and she would put things in there that she thought was too good for her at this point in her life, and she was going to save it. And so she'd put them in that cedar chest. They used to call them hope chests, I think, too. But anyway, she'd store them in there, and sometimes I'd get a chance to see it because it had a button on it, and you had to raise it up, and it wasn't easy. But whenever you got to look in there, it was kind of like a treasure chest. And she would have some things of white and linens, and if she had any silk, I guess it would be in there. And it was always a moving thing for the lid to come off of my mother's hope chest. And all her hopes and dreams was in there. At least I thought that. But her hopes and dreams were not in the cedar chest. Her hopes and dreams was in her children, really. And I guess if she'd put us all in there, we'd have suffocated. But that was really what I come to know as I got older, is that my mother's hopes and dreams weren't in those things that got dry worn and rotting and moth eaten and all that stuff, and that's how it was at the end when we opened it after she was gone. But her hopes and dreams had been in us, and it was amazing. And I'm not trying to get a tear in your eye, but I can get one in mine. I remember that my mother ended up not able to take care of herself, and we had to get people that could. And also, my older siblings kind of took over her bank account because she couldn't do that kind of stuff anymore, pay bills and whatever. And finally, she didn't have any house to pay bills for. And so she was in this place where they were taking care of her. And about the only thing that she took with her was a few clothes and a Bible. And in that Bible was a $5 bill. And this is one of my most pleasant memories because my mother, everything was about us. And so every time I'd visit and leave, she would try to get me to take that $5 bill so I could do something with it. And I could never touch that $5 bill, but because it represented the last thing that she was in control of, she wanted me to have. And so when she passed, I didn't get many of her things, but I wanted her Bible. And fortunately, my brothers let me have it because I knew there was something in there that I really wanted too. I wanted her Bible, but I also wanted that motherhood that she'd always try to show me when I would be leaving. And her last words was always, "I hate to see you go." And she was holding that little $5 bill and she was saying, I hate to see you go. How do you describe motherhood? if you were here today and you were going to try to put some kind of thing on it, then, there's not words to get there. And so we got to honor God because he loved us enough to let us come in the world through that means. And, children, when they're young, they don't know about God, really. I don't think they know about anything much except maybe mothers. The mothers are where they draw their life. Used to, that was the way you fed your baby, was from your own body. And so it was like the mother was there to give you life. And I remember there used to be a saying, and this wasn't sacrilegious because it was still pointing to the God who gives us everything, but it said to little children, they spell God M-O-T-H-E-R because they can't spell yet. And so God gave us that so that we could learn about him. And so we're introduced to God. If we've got a loving Father, he uses that too. We get this idea of God through that. And it's something. And so God then, he didn't do this by accident. And I believe that has a lot to do with when he finally got the woman in the garden from the side of the man, that somewhere after that had happened, it went from good to very good. And that's the only time I really remember him saying that. Maybe it's said again, but very good. And I think about if I was going to if I was going to label something besides God very good, it would be motherhood. I can't think of. Yesterday I was knowing some of the mothers probably wouldn't get to be here, and I didn't get to call everybody, so don't get mad at me, but a lot of you did get to come. But I was thinking about Miss Nelda, and know she'd been coughing a lot, and she don't like to come and spread germs and stuff, and so I got to give her a call, and Miss Phyllis, she was going somewhere. Her daughter was going to come and get her and take her somewhere today, and she was telling me she's not going to get to be here. And I was telling Diane, on Mother's Day, some can come here to be with their mothers, and others, their children might take them somewhere else, but you're still getting to feel that motherhood in a more intense manner, and it's very, very special. And so it says, her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it and delivers girdles unto the merchants. And so you think about the flavor of the father's clothing and what his wife does. And, there was a time when everything you couldn't throw away. We got garbage cans now this big and that wide or whatever. But we didn't have need for that back then because there wasn't that much waste. People would, and so if they bought flour sacks, or if they went down to the where the hardware store was to get something like feed or fertilizer, a lot of times these companies would make that stuff with something they could then turn and make clothes out of, and it was just like everything had a purpose. And so when you went to church and you had on a flour sack dress that your mother made, then I don't know if you ever stood that tall. I don't know if you could ever stand taller than that. I know some people that told me when they was in school that back in the day they would be ashamed to go through the lunch line because the shirt they were wearing had 13, 13, 13. You hear me, Ray? And so they would get embarrassed a little bit, but that doesn't happen when you get older. When you get older, you wish you had the one that made you that shirt or made you that dress and made your home what it was and gave it the aroma that they did. And so to motherhood, to God be the glory for the great thing that you've done, and especially in motherhood. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She opened her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Mothers just don't have time for idleness. They don't have time for a second job most of the time. Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. And so, I can move now to wife for sure, because I hope, what kind of flavor that my wife even brings to the church, to our people. She's just I don't know. She's kind of, that motherhood comes through that, and that's the reason so many times I feel like after a few years, churches begin to tolerate the pastor. But man, they love that preacher's wife, And so a lot of times I told people, I said, I don't think they'd care if I left as long as she got to stay, And that's a compliment to me. That's how I feel, because I know that, oh man, she extends my days. She helps me in ways that nobody knows. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou, mother, excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. And so, we hear people say they preach their own funeral and that kind of thing. Well, when it comes to burying your mother, there wouldn't be enough time to have a funeral if all that she had done for her kids was able to be, lived again. And so, in closing today, I was trying to think about the things that God has sprinkled in motherhood, and I'm going to give you a few examples in closing. When I think about faith, I think about Hannah. And she wasn't a mother yet, but she wanted to be. And so she would pray when she'd go to the temple because she was barren and she couldn't have children. But there was something in her that was, and I got it wrote down, that this is one of the ingredients that God gives mothers, is persistent faith. I mean, boy, they're just not going to lose that, because they know if they do, their household's going to suffer. And so they have persistent faith. And so every time she'd go to the temple, she's praying for a son. And one time she got so distraught that while she was praying, she was talking to herself, or at least talking without making noise. And Eli thought that she was drunk, and he was going to chastise her. And once he realized, and after she got done talking to him, mother's got a way to let you understand what's going on too. When she got done with him, he knew she hadn't been drinking. But he told her, he said, you just go your way. God has answered your prayer. He told the priest, and in a year, or 9 months, whatever it takes, you're going to have a son. And she did. But in that prayer, she had made a promise that if God gave her a child, she was going to give him back. And so it's kind of like Moses' mother. We may get to him in a minute. But so when she weaned Samuel, then she took him to the temple and gave him to the priesthood and gave him back to God. But she held on to this persistent faith until faith turned into sight. My mother wanted to raise her children. I think she used to pray that prayer, let me live long enough to see my last one on his own, whatever. And God answered that prayer for her. But I think about through some of the storms that we had at my home, and I'm not talking about tornadoes, I'm talking about internal tornadoes that was going on in my family, that my mother, even if she was in danger, she just couldn't go but so far. And that's when that persistent faith would come in, and she was not going to leave her children. It just wasn't going to happen, And so there was a persistent faith that got honored, and there was times when you didn't see how a miracle could make this trouble. What are you going to do with it? And then the hand of God would come in, people would get confused, didn't know what to do, and God would deliver. But a mother's persistent faith. If you could go back to those moments when you were too young to understand, and you could be there when she's really laying her life down in order that you can have that hope that she has for you. We'll move on now to Moses. His mother's name, he had a name too, and her name was Jochebed. And Jochebed was under orders, and all the women were in Egypt, that when you have children, if it's a girl, you can keep her alive, but if it's a male child, you can't keep it. Try to tell that to a mother. I think sometimes what would really put us in a state of judgment if we had two children and God said, I've got to have one of them, but you've got to choose which one. You know, I've talked about that here before. And the way that would come down to, usually I think, is, God, I can't make that decision. I can't spare either one of them, so take me. That's kind of how mothers respond to something like that. And so she hid her child as long as she could. He kept growing. He gets louder. He gets a mind of his own. He's going to get rambunctious. He's going to bring attention that there's a male child in the world. And so after she's kept him as long as she can, and she had this trust in God that even the impossible could be overcome, then she built an ark with bulrushes, and she laid Moses in it, and then she just turned him over to the river, turned him over to God, and God, do with him as you will, but I'm not going to lay a hand on him. And so God did take charge and brought that ark with that little boy in it right to Pharaoh's daughter's place where she was. And as soon as she opened that ark, I don't know if God pinched the baby or what happened, but it cried. And she had been wanting a baby, something fierce. And so when they opened that ark and she saw what it was, then she didn't put a sword to that child either. She put it in her house, and she became its mother, and she raised it. And just think about what God did through Moses. But it was because of a mother who went as far as she could go and then trusted God with what she couldn't do. Churches get there all the time. Another one that we'll talk about briefly is Naomi. And Naomi just knew what to do when crisis come. That's what I was telling you about. Mother gave me security. It didn't matter what come up. It just seemed like she had the answer through God. He'd give her the answer and she'd do it. And oh man, I can remember when they were going to cut on me with a knife and stuff like that. And there was nothing they could give me that was going to do it. But they couldn't make my mother leave the room. As long as she's in there, I knew that bone fell and I had my thumb and I still got the scar. They were going to cut it and it was going to empty out all that stuff that was causing me pain. But as long as she was in there, they could do it. And so your mother is one that God gives the gift of knowing what to do when crisis comes. 3 more and we're done. Ruth, or 4. Ruth had the gift of loyalty. She also had some of these other gifts too, but when her sons died and her husband died and the city where they had went to in Moab had been not prosperous anymore, she went home. She just rose up and went home, tried to get her daughters-in-law to stay. One of them couldn't. But Naomi had this thing of knowing what to do when crisis comes. And then her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who married Boaz, she had family loyalty. So I don't care if you're a rascal, and I was. Some of my brothers could probably outdo me. But one time a neighbor lady was saying something derogatory about me, and my mama didn't hit her or anything, but if they'd had an Indian name for her, it would have been She Stands with a Fist. That would have been it. And because mother couldn't see that, she was seeing the other stuff. And she said, he might be rowdy sometimes, but you don't know my son, and don't you speak about him like you do. And so that was the thing that Ruth wasn't going to leave her. The other one went back, but Ruth was saying, you've been the one that God's worked through to get me to here, and I'm not going to leave your people because that's God's people. And so what we're going to do is turn your people into my people, and God's people is going to be me. And that's loyalty. Oh, man, you know, it helps churches get through crisis when the mother just kind of calms everybody down, or when the family's in a crisis, calms everybody down. Mary, the mother of Christ, couldn't leave her out. She depends on God when she just can't understand. And sometimes we get in places like that where we just don't understand. Mary got to that place. She didn't know how she could have a child and never known a man. It wasn't natural. It had to be supernatural for that to happen. And so Mary depends on God when she couldn't understand or didn't understand what to do. And he parted the waters. I've got two here that were harlot mothers. You'd think they wouldn't be included, but they had motherhood personified. And one of them, she was from Samaria, and she'd had 5 husbands, and the man she was living with was not her husband. Jesus passed by the well that day, and he knew everything. He knew what she needed and what she was going through, and he knew he could supply it. And so he said, "Go get your husband." And she said, "I don't have one." And he said, "You're right. You've had 5. You're not married to the one you got now." And boy, all of a sudden, you know, here's a man that told me everything I've ever done. Is he not the Christ? And so this lady then, she goes into town, and when she got converted, then she had the seed in her to convert others. And so mothers have done that so many times. My mother got saved in a storm pit when a tornado was coming. And then she's seen all of her children come to know the Lord. And then lastly, we had the 2 harlots where one of them had overlaid her child and it deceased. And then the other mother woke up the next morning, and that woman that had the dead baby had took her live baby and put the dead baby in the mother's arms and took that mother's living child. When the mother woke up, she knew that this wasn't her child. But nobody else knew, and they were the only ones in the house. So how are you going to decide who gets the living child? And so as it came down to it here, the King Solomon was so wise that he knew motherhood would give him the answer. And so he said, "Bring me a sword." And they brought him a sword. And he said, "To do the fair thing, since the other mother's lost her child and we don't know which mother this baby belongs to," he said, "I'm going to cut it in half and we'll kind of share it with y'all." And the real mother said, "No, I'd rather lose him as have him killed. And so give him to her, let her have the living child, and we'll settle it that way, and I'll surrender. You can call me a liar, whatever you want to, but don't hurt the child." And old Solomon then had the wisdom of God just like she did. And he said, "There's no way we're going to touch that child. You just told us who the real mother is." Motherhood has just revealed a truth that nothing else we could have done would have done. And so in this last one, that harlot was a woman that whatever you do, don't lose the son. Whatever you do, don't lose the son. Motherhood introduces us to that. So what I'm saying to you today is they're coming with us a song is, whatever you do, whatever you have to do, whatever you have to give up, whatever you have to lay aside, just make sure you don't give up Jesus in that deal. Don't make that deal. And Satan wants you to make that all the time. But whatever it comes down to, and as much as you're tempted, and as much as you like mammon, and as much as you want things, and it comes down to a choice between mammon and God, whatever you do, let all of it go and let the Son live in your life. What's your number, brother? 210. Let's stand together. We're going to sing 210 on this Mother's Day. And if you have a prayer, if you have a burden, then Jesus is a good place to bring it. And so you come and, I may be badly mistaken, but I don't think so. While they're getting the song ready. My mother died on Mother's Day. She didn't die. She broke her hip on Mother's Day. And it was on a Sunday just like today. Always is, isn't it? Second Sunday. But anyway, she broke her hip on that day. And actually, I guess it was probably early in the morning on that day, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock on that Sunday morning. And she laid in that hard tile floor and didn't call me. And I was the closest one to her. The reason I said she didn't call me because I didn't live, all that far away. But she didn't call. And the reason she didn't call was that I was pastor in my first church. And she knew that if she called me that I might disturb, I guess, that. And so she laid in the floor instead. And so after church, we went to Mother's like we do. And there she was. And that's motherhood. It's like, I'd rather go through extenuating pain as to cause my child just any kind of being in the way or making them have to do something they really don't want to do. What do you want to do today? How much are you going to have to give up? How much are you going to have to lay aside to say, take the Son, take everything else I've got, but don't let him perish in my life. Let's sing it, buddy.
Before you sing, I overheard what Lisa said.
Okay.
Sister Nelda has fallen again, so be mindful of her in any prayers that you might say from now until whenever. Remember Sister Nelda.
That's what I was talking about my mother. Let's sing. Anybody have a word or announcement before we dismiss?
Remember Saturday night, Children of the Promise will be here at 6 p.m.
Yeah, okay.
Remember Sunday afternoon, CPR, 2 o'clock.
That'll be Sunday, you say? Sunday afternoon. Okay. Somebody else have an announcement? Anyone? Brother Junior, would you dismiss us in prayer?
Lord, thank you for this Mother's Day today. Just want to ask you to bring a special blessing to all the mothers and help Neldan right now and what she needs to raise. People that wait on her from time to time, just bless them. And bless our church. Thank you for our pastor today, what he means to us and the message he give us today. Just forgive all our sins. Help us through the rest of this day to enjoy the day and know that you're in control and you're what matters in this world. Forgive our sins. In Jesus'